the topic is Diversification and Risk Mitigation in Supply Chains, Key Takeaways. I would like to call upon stage our speakers, Susan Al-Ghanam, Section Head, Organizational Resilience and Business Continuity at Environment Agency of Abu Dhabi, and Doha Al-Kamrawi from the Supply Chain Head. A round of applause for both of them, please. You have the energy now. Come on, round of applause.
Hello, everyone. Hope everybody's still awake after the session. So, as we've already been introduced, again, just to reintroduce ourselves, my name is Susan Ghanem. I work in the government sector in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, focusing on protecting the environment in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. Dan, would you like to give a quick introduction to yourself?
Sure. So first, I'm very happy to be with you all today. And my name is Doha Al-Hamrawi. I'm a supply chain leader in the industry for the last 21 years. I've been privileged with working with global Fortune 500 companies like Mars, Schneider Electric, and Red Bull, Galderma.
Wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you.
Definitely. So we're going to basically dive in to today's session. We promise it's not going to, it's not going to be boring. We'll try not to bore you to death, hopefully. So let's go dive into talking about risks in general. Not a lot of people in the audience possibly don't really have the concept of the risks. So how would we define risk, in your opinion?
Okay, so a risk is a disruption to our activities, to our processes that differ in its magnitude and the way we respond to it. Identifying the risks is the first step to prepare for it. And why we want to prepare for it? It's because we want to avoid or we want to minimize the impact that this risk has on us. I would like to highlight here that risk is different than weakness. However, we do treat them in business the same way. So risks are enforced from the outside, while weakness is from within the organization itself. But normally in our risks registers or tracker, we consider both of them as risks.
So basically, in other words, it's the cause of or the disruptions to the activities itself, and knowing and having an understanding of the uncertainty or the unknown that may kind of impact, the organization overall or the specific activities. So let's dive into it, shall we? Because our main topic is focusing on supply chain risk. So, in your opinion, how can we identify these risks? Are there any specific framework, standards, or guidelines that can help organization to, identify these risks, specifying on the supply chain?
Sure. Before I share some frameworks for identifying the risks, I would like to highlight the importance of identifying the risk in supply chain. Supply chain touches each and every corner of our life, from the availability of the plastic cup to the availability of the components with which we will build a missile. So it does have that big scale. So it's very important to identify the risks in supply chain. Now, back to your question, is there any framework? Yes, there is. There is the Scanning Horizon framework. So, Scanning Horizon framework identify the risks based on their cause and their effect. So, it's a 4x4 matrix where on the vertical axis, you have the probability of the risk, the likelihood if it will happen or not, from low to high, while in the horizontal axis you have the consequence from light to severe. Each quadrant should drive certain strategy. Now, cause thinking should drive actions that eliminate likelihood, or reduce likelihood, while effects and consequences thinking should drive actions that reduce severity. Identifying by cause and effect is one of the framework, and it's called horizon scanning. Now, actually, I have a question for you. Talking about the causes, what are the main types of disruption you think that we have, if you would like to cluster them?
Normally in my organization, we always cluster into 4 types of what we define it as crisis or disaster. The first, which is the natural crisis or disaster. The second would be the pandemic or epidemic. The third, which is the man-made. And the fourth is the technological crisis or disaster. Of course, there are many other crisis and disaster that's really not really mentioned or highlighted. And this would actually include political. It could be economical. It could even be like more of competition or even non-compliance. It all depends on the scenario itself, what could lead to the cause of the risk that can actually immediately impact the organization or possibly impact, a country. If we even go back, back in end of 2019, but we've all faced the COVID-19 pandemic. This is something that is part of the uncertainty, risk, and at the same time, nobody was prepared for it, yet we have practice and practice and practice of being prepared in terms of preparedness itself, and we were able to survive it, as from every country in the world and every organization in every country. I have a question for you. Since you specialize mostly, fully 100% on supply chain, what about demand volatility, or uncertainty, shortages, or lack of visibility of data access? Can you clarify this part for us?
Yeah. So actually, demand volatility or shortages or lack of visibility, these are, it can be symptoms or effects, consequences of one of the risks, or it can be a weakness inside the organization where we need to tackle it as well. And as I said earlier, normally we tackle it in the same way that we tackle a risk. So it's a cause, and then we see the consequence of it. So for example, demand volatility. When I have a big standard deviation in my forecast, what does it mean for the organization? It means that my stock covers are not reliable, or my stock covers will not be reliable because the demand is very volatile. So each one of those has its own consequence.
And speaking of consequence itself, can you walk down with us on the type of consequences relevant to supply chain risks? What are usually the most common consequences?
And I will try to be simple. I will not use those terminology,
Complicated words.
because you told me demand volatility and stuff like that, so I will not use those terminologies. So simply, inability to acquire supplies, inability to ship. So for example, now what's happening in the Red Sea we are not able to ship. So what's happening in the sea, in the Red Sea is the cause. The impact is inability to ship, inability to convert. So we cannot manufacture. So for example, at the COVID times, we could not manufacture. Loss of credit. When we boycott a certain product because of political unrest, we will not have enough credit. Brand and trust impact on the product itself. So, for example, when a company undergo or conduct tests on humans or animals, sometimes people will boycott that. The brand itself will get diminished. So there are certain impacts on the supply chains. Yeah. So now I have a question for you.
Sure.
How organization can build contingency plans or prepare for all what we just have mentioned?
Easy. Preparedness, preparedness, preparedness. Organization, always need to take in consideration that once the risks have been identified, we don't just put it in the books or document it and just put it on the shelf after assessment and that's it. No, we need to actually revisit it. We need to basically see if we can we either minimize, because in terms of risk assessment, you have three approaches. You can either avoid, minimize, or eliminate. Of course, risk you can never avoid, but we have to basically try to incorporate in scenario planning. And especially when we're developing our contingency plans, we need to make sure that we have the available resources. Even if we lack the resources, can we obtain resources, from, sister companies? Can we obtain resources through government entities? Can we support other companies with resources that they need? And going back to COVID-19, I believe COVID has taught us, the pandemic in general has taught us that we have to work together. Regardless if we are competitors, I'm just speaking from the perspective as a government entity, we are competitors with each other, but at the end of the day, we have one goal, is to ensure the survival of the organization, to ensure the survival and protection of the UAE, in general, and protecting the people and the residents and the visitors who live in the UAE in general. So preparedness, making sure that we have the available resources, the sufficient manpower, and definitely budget is a plus, and at the same time, it has even made us more, it made us start planning for the future, in terms of utilizing our existing resources in the UAE. Of course, COVID-19 has, because of the pandemic, it has led to, we've gone completely digital in the UAE, so as many other countries in the world. And this is, of course, you have, the Ukrainian war, the Ukrainian-Russian war. This has caused a huge implication, globally in the trade. So basically, this has cut off so many resources, for many countries in the world, and even especially the UAE. Again, it's important to ensure that preparedness, and if it means not only trying to build the plan or design the plan in the country, we could even do it between Emirates, we could even do it with other countries, best practices, we can learn from that, but this is the whole concept of to be able to manage the risk itself in general. So I have a question for you.
But before jumping to the other question, actually I would like to comment on your answer. So you mentioned something that I really like, best practices. So we need to capitalize on each other with best practices, even if we are competing with each other. Because because the risk will hit us all. Yeah? And here I have something to add. When we talk about contingency plan, there is a third dimension for risk assessment or risk identification, which is detectability. So how long or how early we will detect that risk. This plays a vital role in our response on the effectiveness and efficiency of our response. So we need to build a system to detect the risks early enough. Whether this is an embedded process inside the organization, so having a risk tracker and thinking about risk is an embedded process and regular process in our organizations. Or we have, or we capitalize on, not or actually, and we capitalize on the AI to detect any risk. So for example, AI now, or generative AI, can provide us with the possibility of an earthquake to happen somewhere. The symptoms of a flu that is now in some other country that nears our border, or actually in the country that we are dealing with. Something like that. So we need to detect the risks as soon as possible.
What you're actually describing, and I thank you, for what you mentioned. What you just described is definitely horizon scanning and future foresight.
Exactly.
Yeah, because it's important that we have to try to grasp as much as we can information and knowledge, especially from these conferences, locally, globally, and whatever that's being published, in the academic world and in the business world, so we'll be able to catch up, with the global trends itself. And if we just sit and we just wait, and if we basically just go about our day just like with regular people and say, oh, this is never going to happen to us. You know what? The United Arab Emirates, we're the safest country in the world.
And this is in the horizon scanning.
Yes,
The
yes.
low probability,
Yes.
high impact. This
Yes.
is the most dangerous risks,
Yes.
like the pandemic,
Yeah.
like Ukraine war.
Yeah.
Low probability to happen, however, severe impact.
Yes. Yes.
And we have to prepare for that. However, this will have a price tag with it, because preparation for such events are pricey and needs scenario planning. So it needs the leadership of the company to have dream scenarios about what could happen outside the box and build it inside their strategy. And COVID-19 has taught us this. Yeah.
In addition to that we have become, we should never underestimate any type of risks. I mean, today, like yesterday, it was COVID-19. God forbid tomorrow it might be something bigger. So even our leaders in the United Arab Emirates, their highnesses have basically stressed over the years that we need to be very more prepared in the United Arab Emirates to be able to tackle and to manage these risks and the upcoming risks. So they're always questioning us, are we prepared to manage these future risks? Do we have that capability? And this is something we've been working really hard over the years, on a governmental level and supporting the private sectors and the local sectors. Since we've already mentioned about the contingency plans, which is basically equivalent to the mitigation plans, are there any risks, specific risks that may be emerging in the market?
Of course.
And can you give us any examples, at least especially for the audience?
Yes, so being in the urgent market, there are some risks that are specific to the supply chain. I'll mention the regulatory. So in the whole region, we are operating on different countries. Each country has its own regulatory. So either it's challenging to follow those regulatories because they are a lot. So for example, if someone is managing the MENA region, yeah, with North Africa, with Levant, and with GCC, completely three sets of different regulatories. This is a risk because it represents a risk. And the changing on these regulatories and you being blind to it is another change, another risk. You have here as well the scalability. So we don't have this scalability that, for example, Europe has. We have to have our packaging in different languages, which creates different SKUs, which gives the fact that gives hard time to our manufacturer, especially that we are very small volume to them. So, and this is another risk because we are depending on the import, and our volume as MENA represent small volume for the manufacturer side. So we are not in control. We don't drive the production lines. Our volume cannot drive the production lines. So, and at the time of crisis, we are immediately deprioritized. Another type of risk or challenge we have here is the distributor model. So in the Middle East, we have the distributor model, which is another tier in our supply chain that provides volatility. Of course, it has its own benefits somehow, but the challenging part of it that it provides volatility to the chain. So yeah, we have our specific emerging markets risk. I will add to that as well on a general scheme, the political unrest. So we have now what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in the Red Sea, the inflation in our countries, which is impact that credit, the availability of the foreign currencies. So yeah, we have our own specific challenges and risks.
I'm sure that every country in the world basically faces those challenges as well.
Yeah. I have a question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
Can we turn a risk into an opportunity?
Oh, absolutely. Again, we've already digested COVID-19 over the years. So because of COVID-19, we've learned to we've taken those gaps and challenges and we've turned it into opportunities. Yes, we've gone digital, and yes, we have been facing a lot of, cyber attacks, since going digital. We've learned to work, on a governmental level with many government entities. I'm just, again, speaking from the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, and the same thing even in the Emirate of Dubai and all the Emirates in the UAE in general, that we've learned to integrate the high-tech, and the latest information technology, which even helped us to be more resilient and to monitor, the cyber attacks itself. Another opportunity COVID-19 has turned, and because of the cut off the trade, and we all remember during COVID-19, the first 5-6 months, all countries were completely closed, shut down, the airports were shut down, even in the UAE in general, between, transporting goods in the UAE and between Emirates, that was closed for 5 months to be exact. So this affected many small and large businesses and international businesses, which led to almost 99% of closure in the UAE that these businesses have suffered. So the opportunity, this opened up, great, ideas, innovative ideas, and, new emerging small businesses, local businesses, that can basically be beneficial in the UAE market. I mean, even COVID-19 has led to business owners promoting their small businesses, and now they're basically like, mashallah, mashallah. It's now it has increased. Not just talking about in Dubai, in the UAE in general. So people were really happy and pleased that people have taken advantage, of utilizing these internal resources. So at least in the future, if God forbid there would be another pandemic, we do have, our internal resources. Of course, in the UAE, we're always highly dependent mostly on our local farmings for a number of years. The same thing in all GCC countries and Arab countries in general, and every country in the world. So basically, for any risk can easily be turned into an opportunity, absolutely. As long as we are able to tackle it in the right way with the right people, and making sure that we have the support of our leadership.
Yeah. And actually, I would like thank you for mentioning or bringing up the COVID-19, because really it's very expressive on how you can turn a risk into an opportunity. Now, from supply chain perspective, one of the policies or strategies that we use to build resilience in the supply chains for some risks, it's called postponement, meaning keep the customization of the product till the end, till the end of your chain, as close as possible to the consumer. So, for example, I'll give an example. If you have a factory that sells chewing gum, and they sell it in a different format, you can have the bulk of the chewing gum, the pieces of the chewing gum, and then at the end you do a co-packing for the different formats. Yeah. This addresses the capacity risk, addresses the volatility risk, but it brings the opportunity of a faster customer service. You get to your customer quickly. You can win market share. So I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
Thank you for what you mentioned. And just to add to what you just said, it's important to be able to conduct risk treatment plans. It's very, very important. In every organization in the world, once you identify these risks, you need to treat these risks, for every department, depending on whether it's products or services or processes or systems. Again, it differs from organization to organization. If we do not treat those risks and start planning ahead, then it will be way too late.
Yeah, I always say that we are not identifying the risk to take a picture with them. We have to do something. And we have to do something. Yeah, to tackle those risks.
Absolutely.
Yes, exactly.
Nobody wants to take a picture with any risk.
Okay, so I have a last question. Are there any blind spots in the risk identification and in the risks management that you would like to highlight?
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's trying to make sure that we identify these gaps, and we need to identify these gaps on time as early as possible, and especially when you're developing your strategic contingency, whether it's strategic plans, contingency plans, recovery plans, you need to make sure that you're able to validate these plans. And how do you come about to do that? You have to conduct testing and exercises. And when you're conducting testing and exercises, you can easily identify these gaps. And these gaps could be maybe the lack of compliance, maybe a lack of the team or the staff, or the department, taking directions or following the instructions, or maybe they didn't even look at the response plan or the contingency plan. It could be maybe lack of awareness, of the team or the people. So all this needs to be identified, these gaps and challenges, and sometimes these gaps and challenges, it could reflect, yes, as an opportunity. Sometimes it could be an opportunity in the short term. It can be placed in a short-term plan. It can even be placed as a long-term plan. It could be even relevant to assets, assets or projects or whatnot, as long as it's basically, trying to make sure that you are identifying the right solutions for the survival of the organization's brand, value, and reputation.
Actually, I like very much the point of validation and plan. So we put an action, we need to validate it. We need to have a drill, we need to have a simulation to make sure that it's an effective solution for the risk. Follow through. So the follow through is very important in risk management. I will add as well that the third party risks can be an overlooked one. So it's not only the risks of us, of ours, we need to dig deeper into the risks of our main distributor, for example, our main manufacturer, for example, because their risks will be inherited or transferred to us by default. Another thing that we might overlook is the very, very small risks. Now, accumulated small risks can give you the impact of one big one. So we should not overlook that. Another thing that we have already mentioned, which is the low probability, high impact risks. They are sometimes overlooked and they are called black swans. We need to look at our black swans to make sure that we will survive when the risk happens. So that's it from our side.
Wonderful, and I believe we have key takeaways from today's session, and these key takeaways would include making sure that you are able to have access, especially for your organizations, the right risk assessment tools. And these risk assessment tools can fall from horizon scanning, future foresight, enterprise risk management, causal framework, and you can even easily obtain those tools, through so many engagement with stakeholders and global conferences, and seminars and whatnot, to be able to make sure that you have the right people to conduct this risk assessment, identify it as early as possible, get your the senior management involved. Leadership support is definitely key to survival of the organization, and especially adding to the supply chain itself. We want to be able to learn from best practices in order to make sure that we can manage these future risks. Although, of course, risk
escalation.
Yes,
Risk escalation process is very important, and it should be part of your process in running your business. So in supply chain, for example, we run the S&OP process, which is sales and operation planning. Now, it goes across all the organization, and an integral part of it is the risk escalation. Each forum and each step of the process has to escalate its own risk to the next forum in the room, And those forums, they happen regularly, like the drumbeat, every month. So this way, you make sure that your risks are captured. They have a dollar sign next to it. They are discussed, and a decision is made to tackle them.
Only a dollar sign, not the UAE dirham sign?
UAE.
I believe, thank you for your inputs, Daha. I believe we have a question from the audience. We apologize because I've actually noticed we've been standing for a long.
Yeah, you said last questions, I ran up. Great talk. This is right up my alley. I do product development and product sourcing in Asia, and we thrived during COVID. one of the reasons why is we diversify the risk, we spread the risk, and you didn't talk about that. So I've got an office in Shanghai, Ho Chi Minh City, Phnom Penh, and a rep in India. So we were able to be agile and move things around, and we have people with feet on the ground. And even though you had all these restrictions that you were reading about, you would be amazed what you can do when you have people on the ground and what you can pull off when you have a bunch of brains on site, you know, where things have to happen, when they need to happen. Like for instance, Shanghai was shut down. So what did I do? I moved everybody and bought apartments outside the city where they didn't have the restrictions. So they were free to move around and go to factories, and then factories had their clever little things that they could do. So when you have that kind of synergy, that's, to me, risk aversion. So, you know, spread the risk, I think, is as important as the other things that you talked about. I just wanted to share that.
100% and spot on. Diversification is one of the key elements of building resilience in supply chains and everything actually. So diversify your suppliers, diversify your distributor if you can, diversify your portfolio. Diversification is one of the key defense line for your resilience. However, the organization has to know that it's costly. This costs money, and they should have the appetite in investing in that. And I believe that currently we are living in an era where everyone is aware of the importance of diversification after COVID-19.
And just to add to what you mentioned, you know, creativity and innovation plays a huge key, especially when it comes to during crisis and disasters. It's like, you know, you've mentioned, you know, during a crisis or disaster, so many solutions, alternative solutions can arise from this, and we definitely have learned because of the COVID-19, and we continue to learn. And it's making sure, it's like in the business continuity world, what we say, make sure that you have alternative solutions.
You know, one of the building on the question and the comment actually from another perspective, COVID-19 has provided us with the alternative of online shopping.
Almost out of time.
Yeah, okay. So I'll continue this point with the online, which has turned into an opportunity. So now look how the e-commerce and the online has really grown based on a risk. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dana. Thank you so much to the audience.
Yeah. Okay.
We're all out of time. Even the screen is screaming, saying stop.
So
People want to go home.
afterwards, if you can, gather in the networking sessions and ask the question then. Sorry, we're running quite behind. Thank you so much
Thank you.
to our speakers.